Good evening, everybody. Happy St George's Day. And welcome to what is the biggest public meeting UKIP has held in its history. To see 1,200 of you here in this hall this evening says to me this party in the northeast of England is going places. Now you might have noticed yesterday one or two posters went up around the country, and it seemed to attract a fair bit of attention because we have a career political class that have been running Westminster, and they run the three parties. You know the sort of people I'm talking about. They all go to the same handful of schools, they all go to Oxford, they all study PPE, they all leave at 22 and get a job as a political party researcher, and then become members of Parliament aged 27 or 28. They run the front benches of the three established parties, and my feeling is that we're currently run by a bunch of college kids who've never done a day's work in their lives and don't understand. And in a sense, it's that got me into politics. Because I spent 20 years working in the private sector, buying and selling copper, aluminium, lead, tin, zinc, things like that. And I spent the last 9 years of that running my own company. So whatever flaws I've got, and if you read the tabloids, they'll tell you they're many. But whatever flaws I may have, you know, I've worked in the real world, and I'm leading a party made up of real people who, you know, you can see our candidates, real people who've done real jobs. We are not going to be cowed by political correctness. You have come to a meeting of a party. We are unashamedly patriotic, proud to be who we are as a nation, sick to death of a career political class who've sold this country out to Brussels, and we want our country back. Just look at it. You know, even if you look at your passport, the older ones in the room will remember what a British passport used to look like. They will, but the younger ones won't. But even for the younger ones, and by the way, it's great to see so many young people here in this audience tonight. That really is. But even for the younger ones, we've got this plum-coloured passport, and what's the first thing it says on it? It says European Union. I agree with that, absolutely. That's one heck and I like. I mean, look, I don't want a European Union passport. I don't want that flag. I don't want that anthem. I don't want 75% of my laws made somewhere else. I don't want to go on paying £55 million a day. I don't want a total open border to 485 million people. I don't want Herman Van Rompuy. The timing of that was terrific, wasn't it? That on the very night that we were in Sheffield launching the national campaign, Herman Van Rompuy was not only guest of honour with Cameron at a dinner in Chequers, he was also there for a sleepover. And I thought that said rather a lot. Now let's be clear, we don't want any of those things, and yet it's happened. And it's happened because 40 years ago, we were signed up to something that used to be called, can some of you remember what it was called? The Common Market. And there was a referendum on this. Did we want to stay part of the common market? Well, I couldn't vote, I was too young. You have to be over 57 to have voted in that referendum. One or two of you here qualify, I can tell. You know, and my mum and dad both took at face value what the politicians told them, and they voted to stay part of a common market because they believed that it was about trade. Nobody ever told them it would morph into a European Union, and yet we know that all the big political players knew from the start the intention was political union. Ladies and gentlemen, it might be a strong term, but we have been lied to. Yeah. No other way of it. And this deceit continues today. It continues because they keep promising us, every time there's an election, a referendum. 5 years ago, in the last European elections, in which UKIP came second, David Cameron led the Conservative Party to victory in those European elections, promising, if you vote Conservative in this election and give us the momentum for me to become Prime Minister, I give you this cast iron guarantee that if I'm Prime Minister, there'll be a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. It hasn't happened, has it? It hasn't happened, and he asks us to trust him again. The Liberal Democrats, over the last 20 years, 1 minute promised a referendum, the next minute have withdrawn the promise. They've almost done the sort of political hokey-cokey. It's difficult to work out what their current position is, although, having said that, I think there is much that we, and myself, have to be grateful to Nick Clegg for. And I know I really must say, I'm very grateful to Nick for inviting me onto those television debates. And absolutely. We've not been allowed. Oh, cheers, Andrew. Cheers, everybody. Thank you. It's not what I normally drink, I've got to tell you. Although we had a couple of yarn this afternoon, so I'm okay. But, you know, what that allowed us to do, for the first time, actually in 40 years, we were able to debate the big European questions on national television, because it's all been brushed under the carpet in the intervening period of time. So I'm grateful to Nick for that. And the Labour Party, well, they keep promising a referendum every time there's an election and then not delivering it. Remember, they promised one on the Constitution, then when it was rebranded as the Lisbon Treaty, dropped the promise. Now, I believe there has to be a full, free and fair referendum so that we, the British people, can decide who governs Britain. We've got to have that referendum, and if it wasn't for UKIP, having done well in parliamentary by-elections, having done well last year in the county council elections and getting nearly a quarter of the vote across England, if it wasn't for the growth of UKIP, I don't think even David Cameron would be talking about holding a referendum. But, promises are one thing, making this a reality is another. And that is why this European election campaign actually matters. You know, we've been sending people to the European Parliament since 1979. Every 5 years we've had an election. Not, of course, that many of you could even name your MEP. Because this disconnect between this form of voting and the people that we get, frankly the whole thing is too remote. But these European elections matter, and I think we've kicked these European elections off with a bang. There is going to be a higher turnout in these European elections, I think, than ever before. And if you take the last half a dozen opinion polls, Labour are on 30%, we're on 27%, the Conservatives are some way back on 22 or 23%, and the Lib Dems are about where they deserve to be, in my view, down at about 7 or 8%. But the point is this: if UKIP is going to cause an earthquake in British politics, and I believe we've got the potential on May the 22nd to do that, if we're going to succeed in doing that, we have got to beat the Labour Party. And I get, you know, that's exactly what we've got to do. And so it's no coincidence that we launched in Sheffield, and we're here today, we're in Manchester tomorrow, we're in Birmingham on Friday. You know, we are going for the big northern conurbations, the big northern cities, we're going for the Labour heartlands, and we're saying to Labour voters in particular, we're saying, look, this Labour Party, and indeed this trade union movement that used to stand up and represent the interests of ordinary working people and families in this country, they have turned their backs on you in favour of the European project and big corporatism in the private sector. You are no longer represented by that party. We will stand up and fight for you. If we get this right, we will beat the Labour Party, we'll beat them in their heartlands, we will top the polls on May the 22nd, and we will get the Labour Party to change their position on a referendum. Miliband will be forced by his own backbenches to box this issue off, and so we'll get the Labour and Tory parties going into the next election, both promising a referendum, but this time, because of a strength of public opinion, not being able to rat on the deal. And my hope and belief is that UKIP gets big momentum on May the 22nd, and we're then able to target seats for the 2015 general election, and that we will have enough MPs to hold the balance of power, as Nick Clegg did back in 2010, and I'll tell you something, there will be a referendum then, and we will get ourselves out. Now, there are lots of issues that will dominate over the course of the next few weeks. You know, the first thing that we should be talking about is why we pay £55 million a day to be a member of a club that hasn't signed its accounts off for the last 18 years in a row. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the fact that 75% of our laws are now made in Brussels, and that there's nothing we can do at any general election by voting in a new government that can change any one of those laws or regulations. And so therefore our democracy, our rights of self-government, our ability to determine our own future, and I would put it to you, those things that our grandparents actually fought and in some cases died for, we have got to regain and get back so we can give it on to our children and grandchildren. But the issue that will absolutely dominate over the course of the next few weeks is the issue of open-door immigration. It has suited our political class to try to treat the European debate as being over here and the immigration debate as being over there. Oh, no, 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 they're two entirely separate things. Well, of course, we've been saying for years they're one and the same. Because in 2004, we opened up the doors, if you remember, to 8 former communist countries from Eastern Europe. Now, David Blunkett, who was the Home Secretary at the time, said that it would lead to an extra 13,000 people a year coming to Britain. I think he must have been preoccupied with his private life at the time, I don't know. Because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that if you say to people in poor countries with poor prospects, they can come to a relatively rich country, they can bring their kids, educate them in the state system, use the National Health Service, earn money that is 7 or 8 times the minimum wage in their home country, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to come in big numbers, aren't they? And well over 1 million have come. But can I please make this absolutely clear to every one of you? You know, if you've come along tonight and you're expecting to hear me being anti-Europe, anti-European and anti-European people, you're in for a very major disappointment. Because I don't blame any of those people from Eastern Europe for coming here. You know, if I was an 18-year-old in Bucharest, I'd have been on the first EasyJet flight on January the 1st to Luton Airport. I then, of course, would have seen Keith Vaz and gone back again, but that's another issue. But we are not against any of those people. We're not against any of the countries in Europe. What we are against are a British political class who, through Opendoor migration into Britain, have given our own workers wage deflation over the course of the last 10 years, at the same time as the gas bill has gone up, and led to a doubling of youth unemployment in this country since 2004. I accept that open-door immigration and mass cheap labour is good for rich people because it means cheaper nannies and cheaper chauffeurs and cheaper gardeners. And it's good for very big businesses, and it's good for big landowners because it keeps their wage bills down. But it has been a disaster for millions of ordinary decent families in this country, and surely it is the primary duty of a British government to put the interests of our own people first. And that argument is so strong, that argument is so powerful, that in the recent British Social Attitude Survey, 77% of people in this country said they wanted us to take back border controls in this country. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what Labour or Conservative or Lib Dem or the BBC, it doesn't matter what any of them say. You know, they can attempt to paint our position to be extreme. They can call us all the names under the sun. I'm getting quite used to that these days. They can do what they like. But actually what we represent is the common sense position. We want to have an immigration policy that is based on control, not just of quantity, but of quality. And what madness is it that we now discriminate against quite highly skilled people who might want to come here from India or New Zealand in favour of people from Romania or Bulgaria. We've turned our backs on the world because of an open-door immigration policy to Europe. We need to control the numbers, we need to control the quality. I think Australia have actually got the right kind of immigration system, and long-term the kind of one we should have too. Just look how the Aussies manage it. You've got to be under 45, you've got to be qualified, you've got to have a skill or a trade to bring to Australia. You're not allowed to go to Australia if you've got a criminal record, which is odd in a way, isn't it? Because in the old days, it used to be a prerequisite. You won't. Any Aussies here? No, thank goodness for that. I just have to get back after the Ashes series, you know, it was so painful. You can't go there if you've got a life-threatening disease. And as John Howard, the Prime Minister of the time, said, we don't care where you come from. We don't care what colour you are. We don't care what religion you are. But if you come to our country, you learn the language, you adopt the culture, and you become part of our... So that question, I think, is going to dominate the campaign because it is the #1 concern of British people. They're worried about wage deflation. They're worried about youth unemployment. They're worried about the lack of primary school places. They're worried about the fact that in every city and market town in this country, we've effectively, over the course of the last 10 years, opened up sections of those towns and cities in which people don't speak English. They're worried about waiting times, an accident, an emergency. They're worried about the fact that on current trends, another 3 million people will come to settle in our relatively overcrowded island between now and 2020. And I think the arguments UKIP have got are not only in tune with the British people, I think they're bomb-proof, logical, common sense arguments, and this is the issue that I believe will win us the European election campaign on May the 22nd. But I also want to talk, as this campaign develops, about some of the positives. You know, some of my critics have said that I've been very good at being negative about the European Union and some of the individuals within it. I guess YouTube maybe does pay some testament to that fact. But there is no longer any need for me to tell you or anybody else in this country what is wrong with the European Union and what is wrong with our membership of it. What we've now got to start doing is getting ready for that referendum when it comes with some solid, positive arguments about why this country will be better off outside. Why Nissan will of course still be selling their cars to Europe, because at the same time we'll be buying Mercedes and Audi and BMW, and we buy 1 million cars a year more from Europe than we sell to Europe. The German car industry would insist on a trade deal. So we have to make the point that when Kleggers and the others tell us that millions of jobs are at risk, they're wrong. It's probably just their jobs actually that are at risk. But we've got to point something out, which is this. We're part of a customs union. It is an outdated 19th century concept. And what it means is we aren't just bound by a set of rules within the club, we're also bound by the rules without the club. And what that means is we are prohibited, we are forbidden from making our own trade arrangements and our own trade deals with any other country in the world. But we're told by Clegg and Cameron and Miliband, we're told we need to be part of this big club, otherwise we'd be too small to negotiate our own trade deals on the world stage. Do you know, last year Iceland, which has a population of 320,000, Iceland negotiated their own free trade deal with China. If a country the size of Iceland can negotiate its own deals, I'm damn certain a country that is the 6th biggest economy in the world, with 64 million people, can negotiate whatever trade deals it wants with any country in the world. All we need is to have the self-confidence in ourselves to say we can do it and not to surrender this to some unelected. That offers is fantastic, because out there's a group of countries that have within them 2 billion people. They speak English, they have a common law system, they have similar contract law in many cases, they actually like us, they're our friends, and they're called the Commonwealth, and they have within them many of the new booming economies in the world. And it was a travesty that we turned our back on the Commonwealth 40 years ago. And I want to make some of the arguments over the next few weeks about the madness of the energy policy that we've signed up to in Brussels. Yes, I know many people are concerned about carbon dioxide emissions, but what is the point? What is the point in us pursuing a strategy for wind energy? I mean, personally, I think they're god-awful, pig-ugly monsters that are ruining our uplands and our seascapes, and I don't like them on aesthetic grounds. Never read anything else. But the real point about wind energy is it has to be subsidised. And it's being subsidised by you, because you pay a 10 to 12% surcharge on your bill every year, which will be 20% by 2020, but the real cost of this is being paid by Britain's manufacturing industry. Energy is the key component of manufacturing. The INEOS plant on the other side of the Pennines at Runcorn, that plant uses more energy than the whole of Liverpool City. 40% of the cost of a steel works or a car plant, 40% of that cost is the energy bill. And at the very same time that the Americans have gone for shale gas, that the Indians and Chinese have gone for coal on a scale and a tonnage that none of us in this room could simply believe, they produce prices of energy, and we've gone for wind energy, and we're now paying over double for energy that our direct manufacturing competitors are paying, and carbon emissions, whatever our concern about them, are going up massively. What is the point of closing down steelworks in Redcar, aluminium smelting, seeing the cement industry disappear, hearing that even our refineries may not stay in this country? What is the point of doing that when the Indians and Chinese are building 4 new coal-fired power stations every single week. It doesn't make sense. We're not even reducing carbon emissions because that manufacturing that was here now takes place in India and elsewhere. So I want us, once we're free of the European Union, to get back to having our own energy policy, producing cheaper energy, giving you cheaper bills, and giving British manufacturing and jobs in heavy industry a proper chance in this country. I think in every way, we'd not only be better off economically, not only be better off politically, but we'll actually be better off in terms of our own self-confidence, in terms of a feeling of who we are as a nation, of what we represent. And we should be proud of many of those things. Proud that we were the country that developed parliamentary democracy. Proud of the fact that since Magna Carta, albeit with its problems, but we've had the best and fairest judicial system in the world, given that we have our rights of habeas corpus, the presumption of innocence before guilt, and our right to trial by jury. I believe, collectively, that our political class have lost confidence. They don't believe we're good enough. They believe we have to surrender everything to be governed by these ludicrous institutions in Brussels and Strasbourg and Luxembourg. And I'm here leading a party that is unashamedly patriotic with a small p. We're not against anybody. We don't discriminate on the grounds of race or religion, but we just believe it's about time this country got up off its knees, stood on its own 2 feet, governed herself and traded with the world. And I think this country is ready for that message. So I have a question to ask you. Are you ready to join the People's Army to lead us to a big victory on May the 22nd? Are you ready to join that? One last question. Can I have a show of hands for all of you in this audience that are not members of UKIP? Hands up. Well over half. Right, would you lock that door? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to a public meeting. It's a shame those guys tried to disrupt us earlier. Remember, we're the only party doing this. We're the only party doing genuine public meetings, inviting you in, and whether you've come along here because you're a UKIP member, that's great. Whether you've come along as a non-member because you haven't made your mind up, that's great. Whether you've come along to absolutely confirm your suspicion that you can't stand me, that's fine. That's fine too. But we're proud to be putting on these public meetings to big audiences up and down the country. But I want to say this to those of you who come along tonight leaving and believing in what we're trying to do. Please don't go back home and tomorrow night moan at the news at 10 and say, isn't it awful? Do something and come and give us a hand. Because if everybody that feels the way we do lends us a hand, we will win. Thank you very much.